Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of Bec Talks, where we discuss all things small business. We are here today at the Brampton Arts Organization, BAO, downtown Brampton. And my name is Michael Vickers. I'm the Executive Director of the Brampton Arts Organization. And we are thrilled to welcome Alyestal from Peel Art Museum and Archives and Tom Kanellopoulos, a local, I don't know what you'd call yourself, property owner, developer, creative placemaker. And yeah, just a huge thank you to you both for being here today. And we're going to just take a little bit of time to really just talk about creative space in Brampton, the good, the bad, the aspirational, why it matters to have artists and creative entrepreneurs in a city and sort of all that comes with that. But enough for me. Alyestal, would you mind maybe just introducing yourself? I know you're a poet. You obviously work at the Museum and Archives. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe your relationship to creative space and arts and culture.
Yeah, so my name is Alyestal. I am a spoken word poet, writer, speaker, and I've been doing so professionally for 13 years. And most recently, approximately 2 years ago, I made a transition from freelancing and solely creative entrepreneurship into supporting the creative world in a different capacity as a marketing coordinator with PAMA. And so what's really fantastic about my story is that I am a Peel kid, like through and through, born in Mississauga, raised in Brampton, a lot of work throughout Brampton, especially as a creative. And I think it's just really interesting at this point in my career to be able to make that shift into this physical space of PAMA, but also the community building component that it plays in our community.
Amazing. How about you, Tom?
I, too, grew up in Brampton. Don't want to say how many years, but it's been a long time coming. I moved to Toronto to university, studied architecture, dived into that creative kind of world, and then worked in that field for 20 years, and then returned back to Brampton to join the family business, which is a real estate property management development company, doing work predominantly in Brampton, predominantly in Peel. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Awesome. Well, I guess maybe I'll start with you, Tom. Could you share a little bit about why you think that space for artists matter? I think when we think about small businesses, you maybe think of a little mom and pop shop or, a restaurant or a store in downtown Brampton, but obviously artists are small businesses too. And I guess why should people care about having them in a city? What do they bring?
Yeah, I think my brother and I, it's a family business, we're very, we're very strong supporters of the arts and feel that the artist community and arts in general, it's one of those intangibles that you don't necessarily sometimes, as if a person who's not involved in the arts, doesn't necessarily feel, but you can tell the energy kind of shifts when you enter a certain kind of area that is predominantly where you have lots of artists working, living, and contributing to the economic condition of that space or that, let's call them neighborhoods. You can tell with a lot of popular neighborhoods all over the GTA, and if you reach back in their history and how those areas started, and a classic one is Yorkville. Started as a kind of actually not a great area. Artists moved in, and now it's like a predominant, one of the most successful, most expensive real estate areas. It's one of those kind of things that rolls through. But for me, I think it just adds to that daily life quality, and not even if you're not involved in the arts, you will have an advantage or take some of that kind of residual, and it'll influence your day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everyone wants to be doing cool things in cool places, and you're going to need some artists, and you're going to need some musicians and poets and filmmakers and all those people to make those things happen, right? And like you said, in Toronto, you also see the benefit of that economically, and we can obviously speak about gentrification and those sorts of things where you move artists into a space, and then suddenly Yorkville is Yorkville, then it moves to Queen West, and suddenly Queen West is incredibly cool and expensive, and artists have to keep moving, but I don't think it has to be a negative thing as long as you keep the artists around, right? And making sure that in Yorkville there's still space for artists, making sure in Queen West there's still space for artists as artists continue to make Brampton cooler and more vibrant and interesting, making sure that you carve out space to keep them around so that they can afford to be here too. I guess, Alyestal, I'd love to hear from you. Why should people care about having artists in a city
Yeah, I think as an artist, married to an artist, working in the arts industry, arts is the heartbeat of any community. We're the trendsetters. We are the ones who are really the pulse of what's going on. If you want to see the true identity of a community, a neighborhood, a region, you're going to look to the artists to find that. And if we are not creating spaces, safe spaces, equitable spaces, but also accessible, financially accessible spaces for artists to be able to live and create, we are not really serving our community. When we're not serving the artists, we're not serving the community. Yeah, I think, and it's greater than just having spaces for folks to be able to share their art, create their art, but also for them to have safe housing, for them to be able to have affordable wages when they are getting paid for their services, that they're not just getting paid in clout, but they're getting paid in actual money that will pay their actual bills. With consistency. So yeah, I think it's just so vital for a space for artists to be multifaceted and multi-layered. So it's beyond just creative spaces that we're occupying as artists, but it's also ensuring that artists have enough of their basic living needs met so they have the freedom and ability to be creative as well.
Amazing. Yeah, I find that we find that at BAO often too. We'll do different focus groups with different kinds of artists and from different backgrounds, communities, disciplines, but it all comes back to the same sort of things where we almost hit a point where it's like, well, every focus group says the same thing. We need space to make our work. We need affordable housing, much bigger issues in society, in addition to proper paid work, a living wage, all of those different things. I guess, how do you think museums fit into that? Like, what do you see as PAMA's role in Brampton as a space for the arts? And also part of the branding, I guess, that we're speaking about too, right? Like, to have an amazing museum right here in downtown Brampton,
Yeah, we are truly a hidden gem at PAMA. And in my opinion, from the marketing perspective, I think we definitely have a task of ensuring that folks know that this historical building isn't historical because of things of the past, as much as it's historical because we are living history right now. And so we are able to offer up these different opportunities for the community to come in and experience creativity and experience art through our workshops, through our programs, by experiencing art and history and museums, and getting to engage with their community in a whole new way. PAMA is a community-led organization, of course. So when we have our community in this space, we are going to be going in the direction we want to be going. So it's obviously, again, it's one of those things where we understand that museums are problematic spaces. We understand that they are very complex histories and with deeply entrenched colonial pasts. And still, I think because of the diversity of the region of Peel and the historic placement of PAMA geographically in Brampton, we have such an awesome opportunity to be able to tap into this talent pool that we have and the young community that we have to be able to create new stories and histories that we're able to showcase and refer back to right there at PAMA, right here in downtown Brampton.
Amazing. And I guess as somebody who's been in Brampton for quite a long time, like, can you speak about how maybe you've seen creative space sort of evolve in Brampton? Like, obviously BAO has only been around a couple of years, but there's, like, what have you seen work or not work in Brampton?
So what's really interesting is Brampton has a strong industrial past. And one of the things that has been really interesting to see through the evolution of my time as an artist, as a creative, as someone interested in the creative arts, is how industrial spaces have been revitalized in a way that creates that opportunity for artists to be able to not just meet and come together as a community, but also to be able to create their art. So in the past, I've seen that be heavily a fantastic opportunity for these new spaces, or these old spaces rather, to be revitalized in new ways. And the same thing's true for places like downtown Brampton as well. I've seen the evolution of it. I grew up just 10 minutes from downtown Brampton my whole life pretty much, and what's really interesting is just seeing the different ways that art has become incorporated into our everyday living, whether it's art on the walls that's actually paid work and not just people taking creative liberties, and seeing different hubs pop up and be recognized as well. I think that's the other thing too, be recognized. The BIA, for example, is doing a fantastic job of getting artists out into different spaces, into different businesses, to provide them the opportunity to be in front of audiences they may never have been able to be in front of before, and have that reciprocity come in where audiences who may never have stepped into those businesses before now access those businesses. So seeing the different ways that the evolution, and less even an evolution, but the growth is really a growth. I wouldn't even say it's an evolution, because it's not better or worse. It's just a growth. And as the demographic continues to change and age, or in this case, get younger oftentimes, it's really interesting to see the different ways that we're incorporating art in our everyday life.
Yeah. Well, and we spoke about how Brampton can really be a leader in that, and the size of Brampton now, right? Like, surpassing Mississauga. I think it's the fastest growing city in Canada. The arts community is obviously starting to flourish. Tom, I wonder if you could just maybe speak a little bit about, being on that property side of things, and somebody who has like space. Like, what sort of successful collaborations have you seen where like the development community and property owners can kind of maybe incorporate art into it, and then you see things change? So I know we've spoken before about like Geary Avenue in Toronto, or the Distillery District in Miami. I wonder if you could sort of riff on that a little bit with me.
Yeah, I think, first of all, we're a community partner with BAO, and I think that's an important thing, to help support an organization that actually is boots on the ground and, fingers in the pie kind of thing, trying to help artists do their business. But, as landlords or as developers, we always look to try to create, these positive urban experiences where businesses can flourish. One of our tenants is a Segovia, with our partners in Zola Group in downtown Brampton. They have art on the walls. They do music. They have music outdoors in the summertime. They're really influenced in that. Our partner John Cutrzola has started Studio 35, which is a private gallery that people can apply to and rent, and even do music, spoken word. It doesn't have to be visual art. It could be rented as a space. Again, it's not an expensive thing. It could be short-term, it could be long-term, and he's very involved in the arts. But the bigger picture here is how to get these affordable spaces and some traction, some movement, and some momentum. And I really think that's not just one. We're lucky to have a very full portfolio, and we are trying to do little bits and pieces, but it takes a bigger sort of push to get this to move the needle a little bit, and because we are growing at a capacity that is, outstripping any resources that we may have. So it's really interesting that we've talked about Geary Avenue as a great thing. Aesthetically, it's not a special street. I would say it looks like any industrial strip in Brampton. It could be anywhere. But what it takes is a group or a community of people to say, I'm going to create this energy here. And it takes 1, 2, 3, 4 little pieces. And it doesn't have to necessarily be art. It could be coffee, food, but it's a collective mindset of people, which I think Brampton has an opportunity to do.
For sure. And Geary Avenue started with a place like Segovia here in Brampton, where they started showcasing art, changes the whole vibe of the space. Next thing you know, they're like, well, I'm going to open a restaurant. I can afford it on Geary. And then again, the cycle sort of continues. But it's interesting to consider too, how do you change the rules at a government level to create the conditions for success too, right? So you're also seeing in places like Toronto, they have the co-location property tax subclass. So that's basically saying if you incorporate artists into your building, we're going to give you a tax break, right? So how do you incentivize the business community? I mean, some people like yourself are doing it out of goodwill and also understanding the value of it eventually, right? But how do you create those rules for success. In Brampton, there's no below market rent policy for nonprofits, which is pretty shocking for a city of our size, right? So again, you need those nonprofits to be in Brampton to support the arts community, to work with the arts community, to give them opportunities, right? So you have to, as a city, be looking at what the conditions are that you're making for success, because you can also have things pop up, be amazing, but then if you can't sustain that support, it's unfortunately going to move on, whether that might be to another city or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think one thing that we have to look at, and we try to push with any kind of influence that we may have, is always say that this is not a subsidy, this is an investment, right? So if the city invests in these types of programs, it will give back to the city, and it'll give back in cultural kind of elevation of the culture of the city, and actually the betterment of its inhabitants. Like, people will just feel better. We've talked about it before, where there's when I grew up here, there was, and again, it's a different demographic and it's a different time in, like, you know, but there was a lot of places for live music, lots, because my dad had restaurants and we had places where bands would play. So, and I grew up in that kind of thing. When I was 20, I wanted to go see music, and it could be two older guys that are just doing it part-time on the side, which happened in our bar all the time with classics. But then it could also be these kind of impromptu spaces, like we were talking earlier before the podcast about, you know, even spoken word or these kind of, you know, these really personal spaces. And I believe Brampton is at a position now where we're going to, again, development in general has slowed because of certain market conditions. There's a housing, you know, kind of bind here, but Brampton has the advantage of being a more affordable, maybe not affordable, but a more affordable place for people to try to get a foothold. And what I believe is, if you can get this momentum growing and concentrate it in a couple of areas, because Brampton's has a big footprint, but you can see some movement. I really believe that, you know, and it's a larger task as we've.
Yeah, but it kind of feels like we're in this moment right now too, right, where downtown is going to change significantly in the next few months. Lots of buildings are going to come down. There's an opportunity in that, right, through destruction is creation or whatever sort of cheesy line we want to use. But really, there's this moment. You know, the city has committed to building a new arts and culture center in 2028. I guess, Alyestal, I'd love to hear from you. Like, what are the sort of do's and don'ts, or, you know, whether it's thinking about downtown Brampton or it's thinking about this new arts and culture center, what are some conditions for success? What are some things that you think are important for artists, and maybe some don'ts? Or
I think the big do is, do have artists be part of this conversation. The planning, do not. The don't is wait until things are done and involve the artists. I think that's the most important thing. It's like, you can't build something for someone and you know nothing of it. You can't be, I don't know, a doctor building something for artists. You're an artist in your own way, but that's not what we're talking about. You have the hospital to go be creative, right? It's much more like, involve the artist from the beginning. I think that would be the greatest key for success, and have them be available all throughout, and not just as a focus group, but rather as an integral part, a sounding board, a point of reference, consistently paying them for their time, paying them for their expertise and knowledge. But I think that's the key to the success is, do not exclude artists, do not have them included too late in the project, and have them involved from the very beginning.
Yeah. What about you, Tom?
Yeah, I agree. I think we've had this conversation about this space. I think location is huge. Like having the amenities that artists want close by, access, you know, to transportation, having a social energy around creative space, I think is important. I think downtown Brampton, I think there's other areas in Brampton that this can evolve or grow, you know, like, I think that's the thing. We're looking for it to sort of take all the creative stuff that's happened in Brampton with all these great artists that we've had, to help garner or grow a community here that will support each other, bounce ideas off each other, work with each other, do album covers, do posters, do things for certain artists. So it's not just one type of artist group that's kind of elevating. It's the whole platform.
And again, how do you sort of sustain that? So obviously I'll speak just to BAO's work right now, but we've just established a new live music fund, because if you want people to be playing shows in a bar downtown or wherever it might be, I mean, first off, you need a bar, but then you also have to create those conditions for people to be able to afford to make it happen. Or our new studio program, where we're literally just taking half of our office and giving it away to the arts community for free. But again, without these larger conversations happening, right? Brampton's an amazing city for music. We don't have a music strategy. We don't have a music office. So when you're seeing Mississauga win, global awards for music support, it's like, well, again, they made a decision to invest in that, to do their homework, to get the arts community involved, and then kind of build on that. So,
yeah, I think we've been working on and trying to do things, not as successful as we had hoped, but that was one of our key focal points, was a space where this type of performance could take place, maybe even have recording a part of it, tie in a gallery, tie in spaces where you can have events. I think Brampton has gone a little underground in that realm, where there are things happening, but they're not happening in traditional spaces. And it goes to your point earlier about repurposing industrial spaces or banquet halls or certain things that are happening, but that doesn't. When things are underground, it's good to one level, and it serves one part of the community, but it's not comfortable for all ages and all demographics. So what I think it's how to let that grow and give the confidence of that community to invest in a space that becomes, I don't want to say more mainstream, but because I think that's not necessarily what we're after here, but that's more accessible by many groups and maybe even different demographics, right?
Well, yeah, and I think often things aren't necessarily underground because they want to be. It's because they're stuck underground because they can't afford to rent a space or to do whatever. So they're like, sure, we can do it in this Legion Hall basement and we'll make it work. But ideally, they would love proper lighting, proper recording, and then, again, to grow or isn't necessarily a bad thing. But
and when we look at where BAO supports the North by Northeast Brampton music, and it's been at the Drake Underground. When you look at that space, it's not a huge space. Yeah. Like there's some infrastructure there that needs to happen, but it's the commitment of an operator and the confidence of an operator to say, I can make this work. And I know it's not an easy thing. Trust me, we've been in the hospitality business. It's a tough business, but it's going to have to come from the community. Someone from this community is going to have to, double down, and we have to, as a community, then support that space and get people to go there, buy tickets, buy drinks, buy whatever it takes to support this space, buy food.
And I think, too, though, it's also a policy thing. We have to ensure that we have those policies in place that ensure that these businesses are able to thrive and able to succeed. We all know stats around how easy it is for businesses to fail in their first few years, right? How much more even for artists who are they are the true sole proprietor. So, but we have to ensure that we have policies and funding in place to help support these initiatives and causes as well, because the community can do so much until they can't do anymore. And at that point, some form of infrastructure has to be there for that support as well.
Yeah, 100%. Because even live venues in Toronto are struggling.
For sure.
Right? And we're talking with people with lots of money, lots of organizations. Or even if you look at the Horseshoes, something that's been around for decades and decades. But, as a city, that's where that kind of, you have to realize that this is important, and we are struggling to even maintain one venue. So maybe there is some support that happens till we can get things rolling and get things up to a level.
Well, even the Horseshoe, right? Then the city comes in and says, okay, we're going to designate this heritage, not just for the building itself, but it's like for the amazing thing that's happening within this building, because it doesn't necessarily matter where the horseshoe is, if it's on Queen West or whatever, but it's like, no, this space specifically of what's happening in it and how it then supports up and coming bands, right? Because yes, whatever the Rolling Stones played there however many years ago, but also the next Rolling Stones is in there and is trying to find a space, or they're in the Drake Underground, which again, like supporting artists is just good business when it comes to property, right? The Drake, if you're going to stay there, you're going to have a nice dinner. Before you go up to your hotel room, though, you're going to want to go do something. They keep them in the building. Go down. There's a Wicked show in the Drake Underground tonight. And again, it supports the whole thing. So I think we have to wrap it up here. But I wonder if you could each maybe just leave one thought for our listeners here around the importance of artists having space and taking up space. I'll jump in and say I think it just makes business sense. And I think you're seeing that now. The Ontario Chamber of Commerce is putting out reports with the Ontario Arts Council sort of saying for every dollar you put into the arts community, we're going to spit out 10 for your, the economy. And I think whether you like art and then the warm and fuzzy feeling that it gives you is super important. And I could talk for an hour about that. But it just makes good, smart financial sense to put artists into your community.
Yeah, I'll give an example. When just as my last year before graduating, we moved out of the campus, I was at Ryerson, TMU now, whatever, campus, and moved into a multidisciplinary studio with 6 colleagues. 2 of my professors joined after 7 people practicing in Queen West, as Queen West near Bathurst was starting to really start to move. It was before the condo craze, before everything, before Queen West. And what it does is that experience, that kind of cohabitation of 7 creatives, it keeps you in that neighborhood. I stayed in that neighborhood for 20 years. And I spent money in that neighborhood. I lived in that neighborhood. I worked in that neighborhood. And I still feel real tight to that neighborhood, right? So I think that is the advantage of arts and culture and creatives contributing to a community, is that they don't leave. They stay and they reinvest and they support one another, and it gets richer and richer and richer, I think, and it will bring gentrification or whatever term you want to do, but success will also, their success will breed the success. So you'd have to imagine that the artists should be doing better as well in that environment. And it will be tougher for new artists, for sure, but the new artists will say, I'm going to move to Lansdowne, or I'm going to move to Brampton, and I'm going to go to another area where we can sort of lay roots, and I'm going to claim this coffee shop, or I'm going to claim this restaurant or this bar, and this is going to be our place, right? And I think it's really important to get these little micro kind of successes, little fires, yeah. and those will grow in a positive way, and this is why I approach it from an urban planning and a thing that these little art successes, whether they're creative, traditional arts or just creative arts in general. And I think every kind of creative, even if you're doing websites or you're doing sound editing or you're doing anything, it doesn't have to be a painting, it doesn't have to be music, it doesn't have to be poetry. It could be any of these kind of creatives, but that energy is insatiable once it starts to hit. And then people start going to these areas that have no idea. Yeah. And we talked about Wynwood, and we've talked about all these other neighborhoods that become super, super successful because of the energy.
Mm. Okay, final thought, Alyestal.
Support the artist. In whatever way and capacity you can, support the artist. There's free ways to support the artist. There's policy ways that you can support the artist. How you vote supports the artist. Where you invest supports the artist. So it's not always just buying art, consuming art, viewing art, coming in contact with it. It's ensuring that you are voting for the right people who will pass the right policies that allow artists to thrive, spending your money in the businesses that the artist may be housed out of, and then, of course, buying the art's fantastic too. We like your money. So, yeah, support the artist.
Amazing. Okay, well, thanks so much on behalf of myself here at the Brampton Arts Organization and the Brampton Entrepreneur Centre. It's been an amazing conversation and look forward to our next episode.